All right, time for Upfront Thursdays, a look at the week in Wisconsin politics, a week that will culminate with the show on Sunday morning featuring this, an interview with the Democratic nominee for president. So that's where we begin, with the man who conducted that interview. And we welcome in Matt Smith, of course, the executive producer and co-host of Upfront and the political director at WISN TV. And this week we see the power of Upfront. You went to Washington, you sat down with Vice President Kamala Harris. What was your impression of how she's handling not only this final stretch, which is sometimes crazy, right? 3, maybe 4 stops, 4 different places, states in a day. But what was your impressions from talking with her?
We talk about 2 a day in sports, right? These are 3 a days on the campaign trail in this final stretch. Listen, there's an urgency from both sides, but specifically the Harris campaign, to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And the polls are so incredibly close in all 3 of those states. They're either up by like 1/10 of a point or down by 1/10 of a point. So there is this effort to reach everyone and anyone in those states. And that kind of what resulted in the interview. They had reporters just from a handful of states. We were the only ones from Wisconsin, a reporter from Michigan, and 2 from Pennsylvania, underscoring the importance of Pennsylvania. And that's how this developed, because it is all about these 3 states. It's all about the battlegrounds from now until Tuesday.
All right, let's take our viewers behind the curtain a little bit. When something like this happens, you don't have a lot of lead time, right? And also, it's not just the Harris campaign. You put these offers out there for the other side as well, right? So walk us through that process.
Yeah, listen, so we've been requesting interviews, as have many news organizations, with both the candidates, all of the campaigns, essentially until we've been blue on the face. And this one developed literally in a matter of just hours, and it resulted us hopping on a flight Tuesday morning, getting out to Washington, doing a quick interview with the vice president, being there then for her event in Washington, D.C., at the Ellipse, the same spot former President Trump spoke on January 6th. And yeah, Chris, I mean, this is closing arguments. This is the final stretch. We've reached out to both campaigns. The Trump campaign hasn't said yes yet. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days here. But yeah, it's a lot of quick moving pieces. The campaigns are moving so quickly at this point. And even 5 to 6 minutes with a local reporter is so strategically planned and built into the campaign at this point. They're seeing what they can get and trying to get their message out on all these different platforms.
All right, well, former President Trump will be in Milwaukee tomorrow night. Perhaps they'll get wind that you sat down with Kamala Harris, and maybe you'll get a yes sometime later today. All right, I know you'll probably talk with Dr. Charles Franklin at least about the poll, what came out yesterday, the final MU Law School poll of state voters. We spoke with him yesterday here on this program. I'm curious what your takeaways were from that. What really stood out to you?
So listen, I mean, the fact that Charles is essentially coming out and saying, listen, anyone can win here, right? I mean, you look at the numbers, you look at the margin of errors, and I've been talking with a lot of people inside Democratic circles, inside Republican circles, close to the campaigns, and there's some uneasiness on both sides. They see their internal polls, they're matching the public polls, in and of the fact that everything is so incredibly close. It could go one way, it could go another. We could have a split ticket, we could have a blowout, we could have an incredibly close race. I mean, so what you're going to see between now and Tuesday is this urgency to get voters to the polls. I mean, we say every election, it's about the ground game, it's about getting your supporters to the polls. I mean, we're going to see this play out on steroids over the next couple of days, because that is what this is about, and reaching those independent voters, and perhaps those voters who still are back and forth, and maybe I'll vote, maybe I'll not. There's going to be incredible pressure for them to get to the polls.
Yeah, that small number of undecideds. We talked about that yesterday with Dr. Franklin. Last week, Matt, you and I, we talked a lot about the Senate race, but let's pivot to the congressional races here in the state. I'm curious, you've talked to a lot of people, a lot of strategists leading up to this. What are you hearing about the 8th, and which of the 8 congressional districts is probably going to be the most competitive?
Yeah, so listen, I mean, I think in the 8th, from a national perspective, there's this thought that Republicans will win that. You're not seeing a lot of national money, a lot of national interest come into this race, and that is a key indicator in terms of how close these races may be, where these national groups and the national Democrats and Republicans are spending their money and time in these final days. The 3rd congressional is going to be the one that's most closely watched. They pulled Democrats pulled all their money out of the 1st. So the 3rd, Derek Van Orden Republican Rebecca Cook. That is one Democrats still are attempting to flip. Derek Van Orden is seeking his first-term reelection as a Republican in that district. So that's going to be the critical one to watch. And the vote totals are going to be interesting. If there is some split ticket in that district, it's a Trump district, at least in 2020. So how that happens and how that progresses and what it means for control of the House will be a fascinating one to watch on Election Day.
All right, keep an eye on the totals, too, because in 2020, the 8 Republican congressional candidates outpolled Donald Trump by almost 60,000 votes. So that's something to watch coming up on Election Day. All right, Matt, we all know what happened the last time the presidential election came, all the litigation that followed, right? So any signals so far of marshaling of legal forces that we might see more of the same, especially given everyone how razor thin the margin is going into the election?
Yes. I mean, the teams of lawyers that are on standby at this moment is astronomical. If you're in the election business as an attorney, this is your season. Listen, I mean, all sides are preparing for all different types of scenarios. The Trump campaign, the Harris campaign, I asked the vice president about this, and she made a reference to the fact that they have a ton of lawyers ready leading up to the election, on Election Day, and beyond. The same with the Trump campaign. We've seen lawsuits filed in the battleground states ahead of Election Day. Depending on the results, depending on what happens, I think everyone from the top down is preparing for a ton of potential litigation, however that may happen and whoever it may come from.
All right, Matt, we always appreciate talking to you. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday, and we wish you good luck on Tuesday night into Wednesday and maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
You guys as well. Happy final weekend.
All right, buddy. Take care. All right, of course, you can see Up Front this and every Sunday morning, 10 a.m., right here on WBAY.